The year's 1829. America is young, restless, expanding, searching for its soul. On the edge of wilderness, amid revivalist tents and evangelical fervor, one man claims something extraordinary, that he has spoken to God, that angels have visited him, that he has uncovered an ancient record, buried for centuries in a hill outside Palmyra, New York. His name is Joseph Smith. He's 23. A farm boy with barely any formal education, no wealth and no followers. Just a story so radical, so impossible, that it could either change the world or vanish into obscurity like so many before him. But this story, his story, won't vanish. Not yet, because Joseph claims he has translated the words of ancient prophets carved onto golden plates using a seer stone and divine guidance. The result is a new book of scripture, the Book of Mormon, and now he must print it. But printing isn't free. In the 1820s, publishing a book of this size, 500 pages, would cost more than most families would see in a year. Typesetting, ink, labor, binding, paper, all by hand. The bill, $3,000, roughly $100,000 in today's money. And Joseph Smith doesn't have it, not even close. He has no church, no backers, no income, only a small circle of early believers, some family, some friends, some curious onlookers. And then there's Martin Harris. Martin is a prosperous farmer, middle class by the standards of the day, respectable, hardworking, well known in his community. He is not a desperate man nor a fool. He is a man of means and of deep spiritual hunger. He hears Joseph's claims. He reads the early pages. He watches Joseph translate, eyes buried in a hat, seer stone glowing with supposed divine truth. Martin wants to believe, needs to believe. But belief has a cost. Against the warnings of his wife Lucy, who calls Joseph a fraud and a madman, against the judgment of his neighbors who call him delusional, and despite his own mounting doubts, Martin Harris does something irreversible. He mortgages his entire farm, 240 acres of fertile New York soil, his home, his inheritance, his legacy. He signs the agreement, $3,000, loaned to Egbert B. Grandin, the printer in Palmyra, enough to produce 5,000 copies of a book no one has seen, from a prophet no one trusts. It is one of the most consequential financial decisions in the history of American religion. Because with this act, Joseph Smith gets what he needs: a printed book, a tangible gospel, a new beginning. But for Martin Harris, it comes at a terrible cost. The books don't sell. The townspeople mock them. They refuse to buy. Grandin threatens foreclosure. The debt comes due. Martin's land is lost. He is ruined. His wife leaves him. His community turns away. He becomes a cautionary tale. A man who gambled everything for a profit and lost. But still, he clings to his faith. And the book? The book is out, circulating, spreading, preached from log cabins and riverbanks. What Martin Harris sacrificed becomes the seed of an empire. Because from that first printing, from that one man's ruin, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is born. And within just a few decades, it will grow into a religious and financial force unlike anything America has ever seen. This is where the money begins. The Delray Salt Company was a bold venture located in the wetlands of California. The business model was straightforward: mass produce industrial salt to supply entire industries. Ambitious and optimistic, the operation quickly ran into trouble. Production costs soared, distribution networks crumbled, and managerial oversight faltered. On top of that, the demand for salt plummeted. Desperate to salvage the project, the church poured in more money. But it wasn't enough. By the late 1920s, the losses were too severe to ignore. The investment was abandoned and chalked up as one of the most humiliating financial missteps in the church's history. This was the Roaring '20s. Optimism was everywhere, speculation was in the air, and the church, despite its spiritual mission, got caught up in the same wave of economic euphoria that swept across the country. Divine guidance didn't insulate them from human misjudgment. Then came October 1929. The stock market collapsed. 16.5 million shares sold in a single day. Panic set in. Fortunes vanished overnight. The era of easy money ended abruptly, replaced by a brutal reckoning. The Mormon Church was hit hard. After a decade of risky investments and speculative land purchases, its financial reserves were thin. As the Great Depression deepened, tithing declined sharply. Members lost their jobs, farms, and livelihoods. By 1933, church revenue dropped by more than a third. Many members relied on government assistance to get by. Church President Heber J. Grant saw the storm and moved quickly. In 1936, the church launched its own welfare program, a bold alternative to public aid rooted in self-reliance. It was a form of Mormon socialism. Farms were worked collectively, goods were stored communally, and those in need were cared for by the system. Rather than break the church, the Depression reshaped it. Out of the crisis emerged a new principle: the church would never go into debt again. From that point forward, no building project, whether a temple, chapel, or welfare facility, could begin without being fully paid for. By 1947, just a century after the exodus to Utah, the church passed a symbolic milestone: 1 million members worldwide. In the 1950s, Mormon missionaries expanded across Latin America, Europe, and Asia. The church was no longer just American, it was global. With that growth came wealth. By the 1960s, the church wasn't just financially stable, it was rich. Its strategy evolved from survival to investment. It bought stock in blue-chip companies like Sears and Westinghouse, and acquired vast amounts of real estate and industrial assets. Overseeing this financial expansion was Nathan Eldon Tanner, a former Canadian politician turned church administrator. Tanner brought a modern corporate mindset to church operations. He established formal business structures and ran the church more like a Fortune 500 company. But behind the impressive growth, trouble was brewing. In 1985, Salt Lake City was shaken by a series of bombings. A package exploded in an office building, killing Stephen Christensen, a document collector. Hours later, another bomb killed Kathy Sheets, an innocent bystander. Both deaths were tied to Mark Hoffman, a gifted forger and rare document dealer who had been selling supposedly early Mormon texts to the church. His most notorious fake was the Salamander Letter, which portrayed Joseph Smith as being led to the golden plates by a magical salamander. The church bought the document, hoping to contain the damage. But it was all a lie. When Hoffman's forgeries began to catch up with him and debts mounted, he built bombs to kill his associates and cover his tracks. He barely survived a third explosion in his own car. The scandal exposed a stunning lapse in judgment. The church, an institution of supposed discernment, had been duped. By the early 1990s, the church moved quickly to regain control of the narrative. It expanded aggressively, announcing temples across South America, Africa, and Asia. Membership surged past 10 million. With generous tithing from a global base, the church set its sights on something even bigger: the 2002 Winter Olympics. The Olympics were a public relations masterstroke. Salt Lake City was transformed with $1.9 billion infrastructure upgrades. The church mobilized thousands of multilingual volunteers, polished Temple Square, and helped orchestrate ceremonies. When the games began, the church stood center stage before the world. The global image of Mormonism changed overnight. The church had arrived. But just a few years later, the 2008 financial crisis sent shockwaves through the global economy. Even the church felt the impact. Beneficial Life, a church-owned insurance company, began hemorrhaging money. To preserve its reputation for financial invincibility, the church quietly injected $600 million to keep it afloat. There was no press release, no public statement. The wealth ran deep. By 2013, church membership passed 15 million. Missionary numbers surged past 85,000. The church was nearly everywhere. And behind the scenes, the financial machine kept running. In Salt Lake City, the church unveiled the City Creek Center, a $1.5 billion luxury shopping mall across from Temple Square. Fountains, fine dining, and high-end brands like Tiffany and Co. redefined the heart of Mormonism. Critics argued it blurred the line between sacred and commercial, especially the controversial sky bridge that cut through public space. But the church doubled down. Then in 2013, the church bought nearly 400,000 acres of Florida timberland for $565 million, becoming the state's largest private landowner. The scale was staggering, but outside observers could only guess at the true size of the church's holdings. That changed in 2019. David Nielsen, a former Wall Street analyst and high-ranking manager at Ensign Peak Advisors, blew the whistle. In a complaint to the IRS, he revealed the church had amassed over $100 billion in investments, more than Harvard's endowment, more than the GDP of many countries. Ensign Peak, formed in 1997, had operated in secret, its existence unknown to most members. To avoid disclosure laws, the church created 13 shell companies to hide $32 billion in securities over 2 decades. It used fake addresses and voicemail lines to mislead regulators. The church argued the fund was meant for the second coming of Christ and kept hidden to avoid discouraging donations. In 2023, the SEC concluded its investigation. The church and Ensign Peak paid a $5 million fine. For the first time, the church's finances were dragged into the open, revealing a meticulously guarded empire built not just on faith, but on secrecy, strategy, and extraordinary wealth.